Anthony and I were together for approximately 6 months before my daughter Nicole was conceived. I was 17 years old when sent to a school for pregnant teenagers. I decided to move in with Anthony and his mother. He drove me to and from school. When Nicole was born, I felt a love I had never known. Hearing her cry for the first time amazed me. I stayed with Anthony for a while but left due to the way he behaved. I moved back in with my parents. After having Nicole, I was able to attend my regular high school. I enrolled in a vocational program to learn skills that would help me in a business setting. I began working part-time. I loved the idea of not having to depend entirely on someone. My mom watched Nicole during the day and loved having that time with her. It wasn't long before I met Hank. Janice had taken me to his house so that she could talk to his brother. I was immediately smitten. Our dress, musical taste, and religious beliefs were complete opposites. I loved pop and industrial dance music, and he listened to death metal like Slayer and King Diamond. Later, we became a couple. One night, he showed me a satanic Bible. He said Satanism centers around pleasing self, which I thought was strange. He said that's why birthdays are the most important date to Satanists. I now understand that some people who label themselves Satanists can be agnostic or atheists and do not claim to worship Lucifer. However, some do, so it depends on who you ask. Later in our relationship, I attended a Flotsam and Jetsam and King Diamond concert with him and approximately 5 or 6 of his friends. I was waiting with the guys in the front row, close to the stage. Someone told me I would not want to be there when the band came out. They said I'd get hurt. I told them I could handle it, but I was wrong. As soon as the first guitar note sounded, I was shoved into a metal bar that separated me from the stage. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. I then felt someone kicking me in the head with their combat boots. I was thankful when one of Hank's friends pulled me out of the crowd, handed me a grape blow-up pop, and sat down with me on a couch. We sat and watched young boys and men angrily run around, hitting each other, yelling death and pain. I didn't understand why these guys were hurting each other for fun. The show became grotesque when King Diamond came on stage. I hated the theatrics. All in all, I have realized that the devil is not in the details. He distorts them. He distorts the truth. Sometimes it is subtle and hard to detect, but it wasn't that night. I broke up with Hank later in our relationship because he told me he did something horrific. He later told me it was a lie to get attention, but I wasn't sure I believed him. Months later, after smoking marijuana and taking ecstasy with my friends Sam and Kelly, I decided to drop off some of Hank's clothes. I knew that there was a party at his house and that some old friends would be there. Sam and Kelly dropped me off at the party and told me they would return. They never showed back up. Once the party started to die down, Hank asked me to talk with him in his mother's room. My second daughter was conceived that night, and I didn't want to reunite with Hank. Soon after, Anthony asked me to marry him. I told him that I was pregnant with Hank's baby. Anthony said he'd take care of all of us. We married, but I left after a few months due to his violent behavior. He later ended up going to prison. Later that year, my mom took me to hire an attorney so that I could get an annulment or file for divorce. The attorney's legal secretary seemed nice. I remember thinking I might want to be a legal secretary one day. My legal problems were complicated. Since Nicole had been born before the marriage, she was not legally Anthony's child, even though he was her biological father. However, since I married Anthony while I was pregnant with Hank's baby, Nadia, Anthony was her legal father. I finally told Hank that I was pregnant. Considering all the circumstances, I also told him I believed placing the baby for open adoption would be best. I wanted her raised in a safe, stable, and healthy environment. He reluctantly agreed. It was a difficult decision for both of us. I interviewed a lovely couple and chose them to be her adoptive parents. I worked with a sweet, supportive, and encouraging lady during this time. I remember her being a Christian. She was different than others. I wanted to go to church with her, but the company we worked for went out of business and we lost touch. I will never forget her kindness. She helped me have hope when I was struggling emotionally. In September, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I was 19 years old. Hank came to visit us in the hospital. I didn't want to let her go. Nadia was beautiful. Her adoptive mother was waiting for me to give Nadia to her, but then went downstairs to give me some alone time. I knew there was no turning back. I had already signed the papers. I held Nadia in my arms while my mom or dad wheeled me out of the hospital exit to the adoptive mother's vehicle. I handed the adoptive mother my daughter, and it felt like a part of me had been ripped out, but I knew she'd give her more than I could. I have never felt such intense emotional pain as I did that day. Today, it is still difficult. I am so thankful that she communicates with me. Later in the year, I began seeing my friend Martha's cousin Kurt, even though he lived about 45 minutes away. I had moved into a little one-bedroom apartment that wasn't far from my parents' house. It wasn't long before Kurt moved in with me. Not long after that, my dad accepted a position in San Antonio. Since I had a good job in Houston, I decided to stay. We all agreed that my parents would keep Nicole with them until I got on my feet. I couldn't afford daycare and was hoping for a promotion. I had been working as a receptionist and setup clerk for a mortgage company and wanted to become a loan processor. Kurt and I didn't have a car for a while, so he walked to work. I carpooled with a coworker living in the apartment complex beside me. I was later promoted and we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the same complex. Kurt's best friend Steve moved in soon after. Steve was in a local rock band and came with the lifestyle, girls and beer. I later broke up with Kurt and he moved out. I was planning on moving to San Antonio to live with my daughter. Steve and I became involved before the move. Neither of us had talked about becoming a couple or the future, but I was determined to move. My employer allowed me to transfer to their San Antonio office, so I found a small 1-bedroom apartment in the same complex as my parents. Nicole moved in with me. She was 3 years old. I loved being near my family. Steve visited. During one visit, he asked me to ride to Houston for the weekend, so my mom watched Nicole. It was during that time that our son Nick was conceived. Shortly after, my parents moved back to Houston because my dad had taken another position. I decided to move back with them. As a result, Nicole and I began spending more time with Steve. I rented an apartment for the 3 of us. My mom watched Nicole while I worked. I gave birth to Nick when I was 22. Nicole was 4.